The big developments today, a drone attack on the US Embassy in Dubai. It was mainly a fire in the car park, but it showed the intention of the Iranians. And it's been reported that Ayatollah Khamenei's son, Mojtaba Khamenei, has been elected to replace him as the new supreme leader. Now, I've read that some people suggest that the son is even more radical than the father. The Australian's foreign editor, Greg Sheridan, is here to help me out on that. Greg, what do we know about this son of the dead dictator who looks like he's now going to take charge?
Well, Steve, great to be with you. Look, he is a very bad guy. If he is the choice for the succession, then there's been no regime change. There hasn't even been regime alteration. He served in the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. He has been a very high figure in security operations. He's been influential in the vicious Basij militia. He has directed security operations. He's been accused of vote rigging, of having a key role in the suppression of dissidents, and he's been accused of personal corruption and having large overseas financial holdings. This represents absolute continuity with the dead father. Mind you, nominating him at this stage of hostilities is not necessarily good for his long-term life expectancy, but it is a sign, I think, of defiance by the regime so far, rather than even a scintilla of moderation or compromise.
Look, I mean, if nothing, he's put a massive target on his head. And if the Americans and the Israelis, with a combination of the CIA and Mossad, could get his father and about 43 of the other people running that country and wipe them out, you reckon that this guy is not long for the world if that's the case. In your column in The Australian today, you've written that Donald Trump has, quote, delivered a massive blow to the grey zone warfare. What do you actually mean by that?
Well, China and Russia and Iran and a number of other nations, previously including Venezuela, attack America and attack its assets and its allies, but in a way which gives them some level of deniability. So the Russians used soldiers not in uniform to attack Ukraine all those years ago, to take the Crimea. The Chinese use Navy ships disguised as civilian ships in the South China Sea. Now, Iran is the absolute master of this. It attacks America. It kills, 240 American Marines in Lebanon, but it used its proxy, Hezbollah. So the idea is that when it attacks America, America will strike back only at the proxies and never at Iran. It's made, as far as we know, 2 attempts to have Donald Trump assassinated. It's sponsored terrorism in America, in Australia, all through Europe, all through the Middle East, in Latin America. And it has a big network of violent proxies that it funds in the Middle East, the Houthis, militias in Iraq, Hezbollah and Hamas. Now, the idea is that this will never be enough for America to strike back, because you've got to have clear, identifiable proof of who your enemy is, or all the usual suspects will say your strike back is against international law. Well, Trump has just blown that to smithereens. He said, if you attack us, we're going to attack you. And the proximate justifications for Trump's actions are interesting, and they keep changing and so on. But what this is really is a response to 40 or more years of relentless Iranian attacks on America and its allies, including Australia, through proxies. And Trump has now said, proxies don't protect you anymore. You are responsible. This is the return address. And having attacked us, you are now going to be attacked. Now, I think that means every other nation in the world which practices grey zone tactics against the US has to recalculate and say, maybe we're not so safe just because we use a proxy to do the killing.
Quite rightly, you've been a critic and praiseworthy of Donald Trump. What have you made of the leadership of particularly the 3 main talking heads here in Donald Trump, the president, Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth? I think Rubio's come out 2 days in a row, faced the media, and he's been very concise. He called the Iranian leadership today lunatics, and I think Donald Trump used the same word. How would you assess the way that they have gone about what they've done and now justified it when they appear before the media?
Well, it's a mixed grill, Steve. The Trump Mark II is quite different from Trump Mark I. He's not sacking his cabinet secretaries and his aides in the way that he did in the first administration. He has fewer adults in the room, but the adults are very good. Rubio and the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. Pete Hegseth doesn't seem really to amount to a hill of beans. Trump's own justifications have been all over the shop. So it's always more important to look at what Trump does than what he says. And, you know, on the first day, it was all about regime change. Then a few days later, it was about taking out missiles. Then he saying he had to do it because Israel was going to attack, and then Iran would have attacked American bases. Now, what Trump says is less important than what he's done. And what he's done is really cripple the Iranian regime. I think Rubio is the impressive person in the administration. And it's a tribute to Rubio that he has maintained Trump's confidence. So he's been a sensible person, and he doesn't say things that are patently untrue, which, you know, frankly, Steve, is just undeniable. Trump often says things which are patently untrue. But there's been a good deal of confusion in the message that's got out, but they've taken very decisive action. One of the problems with confused messaging, though, is that there's very little support for this move in America itself. Only about a quarter of Americans polled are displaying strong support for this. Now, that's a bit concerning at the beginning of an action which Trump says might last for 4 or 5 weeks and which may well involve further American casualties. But, you know, that's Trump. He's a mixed grill. And it's very decisive action. It's slightly confused explanation. But certainly the American military, I think, seems to be acting with great professionalism and precision.
What do you make of the Iranians spraying these missiles all around the place, including the UAE and Saudi and Cyprus and wherever they can? These people in that region are supposed to be not friends, but, you know, it's very unusual for Iran to do that. What are they trying to do? Unsettle the world, I guess?
Well, I think it does make a certain long-term sense, Steve. It's the great split in the Muslim world is between Shia and Sunni. And basically the Sunni Gulf Arabs hate and fear Iran. And that's one reason they stick so close to America. That's one reason a number of them now have peace treaties with Israel. But, you know, if Iran is not misbehaving, then they're inclined to appease Iran a little bit and go some distance in that direction, but keep their equities with America. Now, in my interpretation, in the short term, these Iranian attacks will just solidify the Gulf states against Iran, bring them ever closer to America. They'll bury their differences with Israel for the moment. But in the long term, what the Iranian regime is trying to exercise is its own version of deterrence. It's saying, if we manage to survive this American campaign, we want you to know that if anybody strikes us militarily, we will strike a whole lot of innocent actors in the Middle East, and we will do our best to cripple the oil trade and to disrupt the global economy. And the ability of Iran to fire short-term missiles will be very hard to eradicate. You know, Israel had a couple of years going at Hamas and was never able to stop Hamas firing short-term missiles at Israel in that whole period. Now, Iran is a giant nation, you know, vastly bigger than Germany, 93 million people, and missiles and drones are pretty cheap. Therefore, I think if the regime survives, it can probably keep firing missiles. And if it keeps firing missiles, it will impose a cost on the global economy and on all its neighbours. And its message is just, if you attack us, there will be a cost. Now, that kind of echoes what I was saying before about America's response to the grey zone tactics. If you don't show that there's a cost when people attack you, they tend to attack you a lot. So I can see the military logic in what Iran is doing. It's horrible because it's attacking countries which are not party to the conflict. It's attacking civilians and so on. And it's going to damage the global economy and force up the price of oil and all that. But I can see that they are trying to exercise deterrence. There's a certain military logic. in what they're doing. They can't deter, and they certainly can't defeat the United States, but they can make life very miserable for the United Arab Emirates and perhaps for Saudi Arabia and so on.
And all the tourists trapped there. Greg, I look forward to your analysis in The Australian. Thanks for joining us.